Greetings, everybody. Welcome once again to the Rec Poker Podcast YouTube video. I'm your host, Steve Fredland, and as always, we are sponsored by Running Aces Racetrack and Casino, and welcome to episode 119. A couple of quick announcements. We've got this great training opportunity, Crazy Like a Fox, starting in less than 3 weeks now, March 21st. So check that out. Go to the website, recpokertraining.com, click on Crazy Like a Fox. And if you go out there and if you want to sign up for the course, use the code FOXRECPOKER, and you can get that course for half off. So check it out. Feel free to get a hold of me if you have any questions at all on that deal. If you're wondering if the technology will work for you, feel free to reach out to me. We can set up a time to go through and test all of that. And a quick shout out to everybody who's wearing the Rec Poker gear. More and more, I keep seeing people at the casino, so that's pretty fun. And then just a quick shout out to the folks who are Running Aces Players of the Week this week: Clint Lighthizer, Daryl Whittingstead, Alex Mua, and Tom Gabler. So congratulations, guys. All right, so let's get right into this deal. I want to welcome back Sky Matsuhashi. He's with the Smart Poker Study Podcast and the training site. We've had him on here a couple of times. And if you really want to get to know Sky a little bit better, go back and listen to episode 111. But he's going to run through a couple of hands with us tonight. So, Sky, welcome back to the Rec Poker Podcast.
Thanks for having me, Steve. I appreciate it.
It's always awesome to see you and to talk to you and be jealous of where you're living and all those kinds of things.
Yeah. California is really nice. We had a high of maybe 55 today, just sunny and beautiful all day long.
Yeah, that's great. I'm really happy for you. I mean, that's just fantastic.
Yep.
And also welcome and thanks to the panelists who have joined us: Chad McVean, Derek Smith, Stacy Nelson, and John Somsky. So thanks, guys. If you're watching this on YouTube, you'll notice that I appear a bit frozen. I'm having a little bit of an internet issue. So sorry about that, but everybody else seems to be showing up just fine. Well, Sky, I want to honor your time and get as much value as we can packed into this episode. So why don't you go ahead and take it?
So can you see everybody who's on the podcast here or on the video? Can you see the screen in front of you? A Jack 10 suited hand? Perfect. So I chose two different Jack 10 suited hands. And the reason why is because last week I hit a few snags with this hand. And sometimes, you look at Jack 10 suited and you want to play it, you want to call, you want to raise pre-flop with it. But sometimes those flops can get you into trouble. Jack 10 suited is a really good floppable hand. It can hit some crazy good draws, as well as just some really weak, just Jack high hands with nothing to do on the board, So I just wanted to talk about these two Jack 10 suited hands to get some of your feedback here. So in this hand right here, it is a 25 NL game online, ACR, America's Card Room, and I'm in the big blind here, facing an open from a 21-15 who is a tight aggressive player. Small blind folds, and I make the call. So first off, whenever I'm going over a hand, analyzing a hand, one of the things I like to ask myself on a street-by-street basis is, what are they doing this with? So what is this opponent raising with? If we take a look at his stats, he's a 21-15 player. I mean, he raises 15% of the time. On the button, he's probably raising a 25, maybe 30% kind of a stealing range. And so I think Jack 10 suited is totally fine to call with right here. Don't need to 3-bet. But what do you guys think? Any opinions on the call?
I'm Derek here jumping in. Yeah, no, I think I completely agree. Agree with the idea, or even earlier that you said that just Jack 10 suited just looks so juicy. It's of course not in the upper echelon of all hands, but it's like right in that spot where you definitely want to try to see a flop if you can get in there. And in this case, calling, you get to see a flop. So I like it.
Absolutely good.
And just to clarify for the audio listeners too, so this is a four-handed table, and the button opened to 55. With the blinds at 10-25 or 10-20, and you call out of the big blind.
Yeah, exactly. 10-25 is the blinds. It was just over a min raise here.
Okay.
Cool deal. All right. So we get to see a flop here, a very lovely flop. 3 of diamonds, king of diamonds, queen of spades, and we have the Jack 10 of diamonds here. So we flop the open-ender, the nut open-ended straight draw, as well as the third nut flush draw right here. So if we take a look at the stats, you guys might not be familiar with my HUD, but this C-bet stat, the first one, C-bet of 79%, is their C-bet on the flop. So this person C-bet 79%, 8 out of 10 times they C-bet. So we can expect a C-bet right here. And my intention with this spot, of course, I'm expecting but I have such a strong hand, 9 outs to the flush, 6 more outs to the straight. This was a check raising spot for sure for me. So I check. Whoops. So I check, and then he checks behind. What a bummer right there. But what do you guys think about my intent to check raise?
I like it. This is John Somsky here. I think, given what you said, you didn't have the lead before the flop. You just called. So betting out here would have sounded a little fishy, like maybe you'd flopped a set or something like that. So I think this is the best way to get value out of your hand.
Nice. Okay, good.
I mean,
what was your image? I'm sorry. Did I butt in here?
Go ahead, Stace.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, Stacey.
What was your image as far as your number of C-bets and recent activity?
Well, generally when I'm okay, so in this spot I'm not a C-bet, or I'm facing a C-bet. My fold to C-bet is generally somewhere around 50% or so, 55%. This player has 231 hands on me. My image at this table, I've only been at the table for 5 hands, so I don't think I've developed much of an image right now.
Okay.
But he is a tight aggressive player, so he probably does have he probably does have a HUD, and he has some stats on me. The relevant stats for myself at this point, my call 2-bet out of the big blind, it's probably pretty small at 10%, give or take.
Okay.
And my 3-bet is small at roughly probably like 5% out of the big blind. So if I'm not 3-betting right here, I don't have aces, kings, queens. I don't have ace king even, because I didn't 3-bet. So
okay.
I've capped my range well by making this call. And generally, I'm a tight aggressive player, so he might see me. He should see me as the kind of person that would fold quite often to C-bets, but he's not making the expected C-bet, which is kind of interesting here.
What does that tell you about his hand?
It tells me that he's either slow playing a monster, or he just has absolutely nothing. He raised pre-flop with like pocket 9s, and it comes king, queen, high, I called. He's just scared, doesn't want to C-bet.
Gotcha.
Yeah. One of those two options, But like I said,
what's the approach here? So, like, if you check raise and then he re-raises you there, is this just a hand where it's just so wet? Then you've got such a great draw, you're just willing to get it in. And I guess how would that change if you're not suited? If you just have the open-ended straight draw, do you still check raise, or is it just a check call?
With the open-ender, I'm probably just check calling at this point. Open-ender plus the flush draw. I have so much equity, so many ways I can win this pot. Flushes, straights, even some kind of like random trips, turn river trips and stuff. And then plus just with my draws that I have, I can put so much aggression at him. I can check raise right here. Once he calls on the flop, I can bomb the turn for 3/4 pop. If he calls again, even if I didn't hit anything, I still have a chance on the river to hit something. So there's so many different ways, just utilizing aggression to get him to fold, as well as hitting one of my hands to earn some value from him. But to answer that other part of your question, I don't look at this and automatically think I'm getting it in here. I still have just a jack high hand. And my intention, if I do any betting and my check raise, is to get him to fold. So I do have a great draw, and if I do catch an ace, a 9, a diamond on the turn, great, I could get extra value. But when you have a non-value hand, if you can get your opponent to fold, especially after putting in a C-bet, I will have won 2 big blinds from him pre-flop. If I get an additional 3 big blinds, that's 5 big blinds with a jack 10 suited that I win out of this hand. It's not a bad thing at all. Check raising and him ending up folding.
For sure. But what's your intent, though? If you do check raise and he re-raises you back, are you then just probably calling and just trying to realize some equity on the turn?
No, probably if he re-raises me back, depending on the sizing that he used, my idea is that I would re-raise all in. So it was a check raise and then a 4-bet all in to put a little bit more pressure on him to get him to fold. And if he ends up calling, great, I have 16 outs to a really good made hand. So it's not a bad thing. But if he C-bets and then 3-bet shoves on me, I would consider a folding. I don't know that I would 100% fold, but I'm thinking with my jack 10 suited versus his C-bet and then 3-betting range, I probably have at least 45%, maybe even 50% equity because I have so many outs. Mathematically, it's probably a good call versus his shove, but I would just hate doing it. I would feel sick to my stomach calling all in as opposed to shoving and having some fold equity. Because if I call all in, I'm just relying on hitting on the turn or river, which that's like playing bingo,
Right. Derek? Did you have anything, Derek?
Honest to God, he answered my question. Sky, you answered it right away because I was curious to see. I was originally going to ask about the thought of not pouncing right there on the flop with the idea of taking it down more on the turn because you want to, at this spot, with just, technically jack high, take this hand down. Would it look more powerful to do that, go with the check raise there and just call on the flop bet and then check raise the turn? Would it look stronger? But actually, before I had a chance to ask it, I think the reasons you explained why you were doing it then, I have to withdraw my question. So
cool beans. So anyone else before we head to the turn? No?
Nope,
All right. So, okay. So the turn card comes the ace of spades. I turn the nuts. The board is 3 of diamonds, king of diamonds, queen of spades, ace of spades. I've got the Broadway straight, as well as I still have a backup flush draw. I guess in case we're chopping if he has a jack 10 or something, So I've got the nuts right now. So at this point, he did not bet the flop like I expected. I really think the best thing is that I need to put out some kind of a bet just to get value out of a random ace, maybe a king. I think most of his kings would c-bet on the flop, so I doubt he has any kings unless he was slow playing pocket kings. That's the only thing I can think. Or king queen maybe. So he could have been slow playing pocket kings or pocket queens. But he's a tight aggressive player. These guys, just like me, tight aggressive, I try never to slow play. If the value is there for me to get, I am betting to try to build that pot as often as possible.
Right, and it's a pretty wet board.
Kings and queens are potentially in his range, but yeah.
No, I was going to say, and it's a pretty wet board too, so even if he has kings or queens, that's a pretty wet board to risk a check back, I would think.
I agree with you 100% right there. So I don't expect him to have much, but 75 cents, 3 big blinds. I'm hoping he can call with a random ace that just now hit, or even a third pair, pocket queens. Or maybe he's just unbelieving and doesn't want to fold pocket 9s or 8s, Yep. So that's why I made that bet. Let's see what he does. He raises right here. So before I show you what I did, what do you guys think I should do? Should I just call with my nuts and a flush draw, or should I raise to get some value?
Yeah, I'm probably raising for value here just because I'm out of position. I just think if I just call, then what do I do on the river? I mean, if it's a blank, how do I get value? Do I lead out again, which looks weird after I just called? Do I risk a check? Do I hope he's going to continue? And if it's a king, then for sure, where am I at? Then I'm not going to lead out really. I don't know. I kind of want to get value here. That's at least my thought, out of position.
Would anybody check instead of betting?
No, I like the betting as well. I think you need to get your value when you can. He already showed a lack of aggression on the flop. So I think this plays perfectly into it. He won't give you as much credit because it could look like you're just trying to steal because of his lack of aggression, and makes him more likely to defend.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I agree with both of you right there. And I'm also susceptible to some kind of potential flush draw, a couple of spades that he might have, or even like an ace 4 of diamonds kind of a thing. It just now hit a pair and has a better flush draw than I do. So I agree with you. So what I decide to do is I make it 555, like double his bet plus another 3 or so big, or 4 more big blinds or so, in an attempt to get value out of like a random ace, maybe a king or 2 pair, or even those draws like I just mentioned, And he ends up calling, which is lovely. Any comments there?
Talk a little bit about your bet sizing there too, because I know typically a lot of the folks that are on here kind of talk about doing a 3x sizing. So I would have kind of thought you'd maybe go like $7 or whatever. Is it just because you're betting, because you're raising for value, you actually want to call? Is that why the sizing, or is that kind of your standard 3-bet there?
It's not necessarily a standard sizing. I do want the call, but I've also given him enough rope to hang himself with a shove to make him think that, maybe I was just betting and then 3-bet bluffing here. Maybe if he shoves his remaining $19, I'm going to fold. So I chose a sizing that I felt was big enough to get me value if he does call, but also big enough to entice that 4-bet from him.
Okay.
But he obviously just called right here, which is still a good outcome. I mean, we've built the pot. The pot is now $12 on the river, and we both have $19 behind.
Yep.
Yep. All right. So the river comes the 5 of spades. So the entire board: 3 of diamonds, king of diamonds, queen of spades, ace of spades, 5 of spades. So there's 3 spades on the board. I have jack 10 for the nut straight. No full houses beat me, but there could be some potential flushes that beat me right here.
But yeah, what flushes do you think he could have there? Like king jack of spades or something, or like what spades would he have there?
I think any flushes that he would have would be like a jack, a 10, or a 9 or an 8 high flush, like 8 of spades, 7 of spades or something, because he could have raised pre-flop with 8, 7 of spades.
Then checks flop.
As soon as he gets a flush draw, hey, I'm going to raise, but I still have a flush draw. I'm not going to fold it, so I call on the turn, So I think those kinds of hands, even the jack 9 of spades is totally in his range right here. Open pre-flop, check flop, bet, call turn.
What about a king of spades with something else? Like you get top pair, you just checking back on the flop just to control the pot a little bit. You don't think there's a king of spades in his range?
It's possible he does have those, but seeing as he c-bets 79% of the time, and let's see, that's 15 out of 19, this guy likes to c-bet all of his top pair hands. He could have done it, but I would say, like you said, a random king of spades, king 10, king jack of spades is probably c-betting, so I'd have to discount those big time. He has the weaker spades in his range, I think. All right. So I decide to bet out for $7. I don't want to check and just let him check behind because he is checking behind all of his potential ace X hands, any kind of weird 2 pairs. If he just rivered an ace 5 2 pair, ace 5 of clubs or something, he's just checking all those behind because that board is so wet and ugly. I bet and then I 3-bet on the turn. He's checking back a ton of hands that's giving me value here. Now, I bet $7 into 12. He could shove over the top for his full $19, and I would just kind of I would call guaranteed because the flushes I think are such a small part of his range, and I think he could try to attempt some kind of a bluff, but I think my $7 bet is getting value out of a plenty of weaker 2 pair, even some kind of weird trip 3s or something that he's slow play. I just think this is a really good value bet, and he can call with a lot of hands of just unbelieving that I have such a strong hand. So what do you guys think of that $7 bet?
Yeah, I agree. I just think you can't risk check here.
Yep, 100%. Would you? Oh, go ahead.
Or Chad?
I was going to say, I think it's the perfect sizing because looking at that board, like you said, he could have any ace, king, queen, 2 pair, even a small set, and $7 into a $12 pot, like he's going to call. And if he comes over the top, well, you're just going to call that anyways because you're only losing to a backdoor flush, which would be really hard for him to get to in this situation. So I think the $7 is good because if you go a little bit higher, I don't know if he calls with just 1 pair.
Yep. I agree there.
Derek?
Yeah, I just thought the size that you picked for the river, not to just be patting backs here, but I'm not sure. I think we all agree he's going to call there. If you go only slightly higher, I still don't even know if he feels like there's fold equity. But I feel like you chose an amount where there could be fold equity if you jam. So I feel like you kind of put it right on the edge of the bitter, the tip top of how much value you could possibly get from here. So, anyways, kudos to you on that one because obviously you called off. But I'm not sure. I don't think you go too much higher at all because there's no illusion of fold equity then.
Yeah, I mean, part of it for me is though it just it looks like a value bet, and part of me is this is this a spot for sort of a polarizing sizing where you do just rip it in, and then he just has to face the decision if he's going to call or not. Yeah, I mean, obviously you don't want to lose the $7 of value, but I think you put him in a tough spot if he has 2 pair and you rip it in here.
Definitely. And if you take a look at his stats here, he folds on the river 67% of the time. It's only 2 out of 3, so it's a really small. But he's more foldy on rivers than he is aggressive. He only bets 27% right here. So overall, I think just value betting, I cannot, like you said, risk the chance that he checks behind. But I got to make it an amount that he's willing to call. And I think just over half pot. Once again, it was $12.30 in the pot. I bet 7. Just over half pot, it entices the call, yeah. because he only has to be right roughly 25% of the time. And he might actually crunch the numbers and say, hey, my 2 pair is good. He could just be bluffing with a random ace that hit on the turn,
Do you think he folds? I mean, if you were to shove, let's just play the hypothetical world. If you were to shove and make a big over bet there, do you think he folds 2 pair? Do you think is the only range that calls your 7 that doesn't call your shove is like a single pair, like a single ace? I mean, are a lot of his hands going to call your shove though? Ace king, ace queen, pocket fives, pocket threes, king queen. Are they going to call a shove? Do you think?
It's possible. It's possible they could call, but I just went with the sizing to just try to get some value,
Yeah, and I like it. I'm just kind of exploring all the different options there.
Yeah, he's definitely folding, or he's calling less frequently versus a shove, I would say.
Yeah.
So, yeah. All right. Any last comments before we move on to hand number 2?
That's a good one. Well, do we see? Did he call you?
Yes, he did. But the bummer is on America's Card Room, when you're the winner in the hand, the caller doesn't have to show. So they just put their hands. So we'll never know. But we can assume he called my $7 bet on the river, right? He 2 pair type hand. He might even have an ace 10 that just doesn't want to believe that we have a top pair beat. So at a minimum, it's got to be an ace at a minimum to make that $7 call. Most likely 2 pair, or even like a flop set of something that just did not boat up and he wasn't willing to put in more money without a boat,
And he checked back flop trying to be tricky.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Cool. Good example.
All righty. Good. So we'll move on to hand number 2 here. Jack 10 again. Now, this is a heads up situation. I'm on the button, which is also the small blind when you're playing heads up against somebody. Now, the player that I'm up against, I have 1,000 hands on them. They're a 28-19 player. So they're pretty loose aggressive. They like to play a lot of hands. And then so I'm in the small blind, so I get the chance to open the pot here. And I make it just a min raise open. And then he ends up calling. So pre-flop, what do you guys think about that min raise open?
Has that been sort of your standard play out of the small blind heads up?
Oftentimes, so looking at my HUD, I'm 16 hands in against him. I have 1K hands, but this is probably all 6 max or full ring stats that I have with him. When I'm feeling somebody out at a heads up situation, I'll often just min raise to begin with to kind of see how they respond. If I'm min raising, they're doing a lot of 3 betting, I'll up it to 2.5 or 3 big blinds. But in the beginning, it's only been 16 hands. I'm still at the min raise phase to see how he responds,
And you're not implementing any sort of a limping strategy heads up here at this point?
No, I don't.
Yeah.
Well,
okay.
Yes, I can later on, but like I said, only 16 hands. Yes.
Yeah, then I like it.
Mm-hmm.
I'll jump in and just say, on the contrary, and I could be right or wrong, but I don't love just the min raise only because the sense of building the pot with the hand that you have. Would you do that? And by the way, I completely understand if you might know this player enough, or there's a dynamic in this game that you would completely understand better than I would. But would you do that with a big enough hand to kind of not because you have to balance in this in a 25 game, but is this the type of thing you would do with queens, kings, aces ever? Would you ever just min raise with it?
Heck no, and that's why I don't. That's why I do not like my min raise right here. So you hit the nail on the head for me, Derek. Okay.
Yeah, I guess the one thing I guess I don't know your typical raises. The one thing I like about it is it kind of controls the size of the 3 bet. Then, if you start raising more, then his 3 bet's going to be more. Then you have a bigger decision. I kind of like this where if you're taking control of the pot, if you 3 bets you, it's not going to be so much that it prices you out of it usually. But yeah, if you're raising different amounts of different hands, then maybe you need to do something else. But I don't mind it, frankly.
Yeah. Yeah, I gotcha. This could be some kind of like a disguising thing, occasionally coming with a min raise and 3 bet or 3 big blinds other times and all. But one of the things, like you just said, like my min raise kind of controls his 3 betting size. That's why when I'm 3 betting, I'm always making it, no matter what my opponent open raises, I'm making it 9 big blinds if I'm in position and 10 to 12 if I'm out of position. I don't let their min raise, especially at a full ring or a 6 max table, I don't let their min raise dictate the size of my 3-bet, because a lot of players will come in for a min raise out of the cutoff because they want to call a standard 3x 3-bet to 6 big blinds. They're happy calling 6 big blinds with their jack 8 suited and their ace 4 offsuit. So that's why I always make it bigger, So he could be the kind of player that sizes it smaller when you're up against a smaller open raise, but that's not the style I play. Just a comment on what you said there, Steve.
Well, no, that's interesting. I mean, just a little bit of an aside there. So if somebody opens to 4x, you'd still go to 9 or 10, depending on your position?
Yep.
Oh,
Yep,
interesting.
Depending on the position and what I think about the player. If I'm totally going for value, they make it 4x. I will often. No, I'm sorry. I shouldn't say that. If they make it 4x, I'm probably going 12 in position, between 10 to 12 in position, and roughly the same out of position right there. Now, if they make it bigger, like 5 or 6x, some kind of weird open raise sizing, I normally only 3-bet for value unless I know that they're bluffing with that kind of sizing.
Okay,
and then I'll make it like 3x or bigger.
Okay.
Yeah. Anybody else? Oh, go ahead, Taylor.
I personally like the min raise. I think it can be part of a total strategy. So even if you include the top part of your range, the kings, the queens, the aces, etc., in there, it can just help build a pot when you're in position. So it's something that I personally like to employ because the big blinds can be calling a lot here.
Yep, absolutely. You're right about that. It can be part of a good, well-balanced strategy for sure. Just in general, like Derek had said, if I'm not making it 3 big blinds here and I make it later 3 big blinds with aces, he could potentially see into that, and then stay away every time I make it 3 big blinds and call every time I min raise, which I guess I can flip the script and then start playing differently, based on that information. Like in heads up games, you're constantly adjusting to each other. But yeah, I made it a min raise here. Let's see what happens on the flop. Flop comes down king, 4, 5, heart, club, and I have the jack of clubs, 10 of clubs. So I flop the backdoor flush draw plus a backdoor straight draw. And it's just, I basically hit almost nothing on this board, king high board, So he checks, and I decide to c-bet just a half pot, 50 cents into $1, and he ends up calling right here. One of the questions I ask myself is, because this was a total bluff, I wanted him to fold, but he ended up calling. What is he calling with in this instance? Now, I'm thinking he can call with any king. He can also call with quite a few different ace X hands, like ace 8, maybe like ace 8 of clubs, or even just a random ace 8 of anything, just because he has an ace and he doesn't want to give up so easily on the flop. He could call with a random 5, a random 4, even a gut shot like 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. He might call on the 4-5 board, a 7-8. He could also call with open ender 6-7 and any 2 hearts for a flush draw. So he has a pretty wide range to call here. Because I only made it half pot, I gave him a really easy bet to call with a really wide range, like I said.
Do you think it sort of caps his range or adjusts his range that he didn't re-raise you here, though? I mean, do you take him off some of those hands when he doesn't re-raise you?
No, not any of the hands I just mentioned. I would take him off pocket 4s, pocket 5s, pocket kings for a set. Well, I take him off pocket kings because he didn't 3-bet in the first place. But I don't think he has any sets. He probably doesn't have any really strong top pair hands either. Because he didn't raise, I'm just taking out all super strong hands. Even 4 or 5, I'm probably taking out too on that semi-wet king high board. If I have a king, I'm probably calling if he raises with his 4-5-2 pair. If I have a couple hearts, I'm probably calling. He's getting value. So yeah, let's remove all his strong hands right now.
Okay, so you don't think he would check raise with some sort of like a 6-7 combo or a couple of hearts?
Oh, it's possible he could. Yeah, he could totally check raise, but
you're
he's choosing to just check call right now. So I put a lot of draws and weaker showdown value hands in his range.
Okay.
Yeah. Anyone else? No? Alrighty. So the pot is $2 on the turn. One thing too, real quick. I mentioned at the beginning, I have a lot of backdoor, not a lot. I have 2 backdoor draws, backdoor straight and backdoor flush draw. Oftentimes when I c-bet bluff on the flop, I am planning on double barreling if some of my equity outs come in. And an equity out is a card on the turn that doesn't give you a made hand, but it gives you some kind of a draw. So a club right here would give me a flush draw. On the turn, a club would give me a flush draw. A queen, an ace, or even a 9 would give me some kind of straight draw as well. So ace, queen, 9, and a club, I'm planning on barreling right here.
Okay.
Any questions on that before we go to the turn?
Well, is the thought there a combination of obviously you pick up some hand equity, but also the fact that when he just calls you, there's a lot of his hands that he'll release on the turn?
Yes, it's both of those combined. Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. And then just in general, this player does not like to fold on the turn. He only folds 25% of the time. So I think if I want to push him off on the turn, he folds on the flop 56% of the time. On the turn, 25%. So he's more flop honest. He kind of makes his decision in the hand on the flop. Once he stays in on the flop, on the turn, it's harder to get him off. So if I'm going to double barrel, I think I need a double barrel on the larger size. I use 50% on the flop. I think I need to go 2/3, 3/4 pot on the turn.
Okay.
Yep. So the turn comes the deuce of clubs, giving me the flush draw. So the board is king of hearts, 4 of hearts, 5 of clubs, deuce of clubs. I have the jack 10 of clubs once again. The best card for me right here would have probably been either a jack or a 10, or probably the queen of clubs would have been the single best. But the deuce of clubs is a nice second place hand, or second place card for me, So he checks once again, which is what I expect on this card that doesn't really change much on the board other than adds a potential draw. And I bet only a half pot, $1 into 2. And of course, he calls right there. So what do you guys think about my bet?
Go
ahead.
I was going to say, was there any thought of going higher? You went half pot on the flop and you half pot on the turn. It could come across that you're just trying to get him to come along with you each way.
Yes, that's possible. Or it could come across as I'm just making a super simple half pot bluff, double barrel bluff, So like I said a little while ago, I think if I'm going to double barrel here to push a guy off who doesn't like to fold, I'm going to have to use a bigger sizing. I really would have preferred $1.50 here, 3/4 pot. And to answer your question, Chad, I can't really tell you what I thought at the time. I don't remember when I played this hand. I just was looking through my database and found a good Jack 10 suited hand. But my guess was I just wanted to make a cheap bluff and try to get him to fold. I probably wasn't thinking enough about the sizing I needed to make it to get that fold.
When you made that bet, were you already thinking about what your plans were for the river if he called you? I probably wasn't, to be honest. If I was thinking about that river, I think I would have made my bet bigger right here, because looking ahead to the river means I'm giving a lot of thought to the current street as well. I should be, at least. So if I was thinking about the river, I should have made this bet bigger. So as you think about it now, okay, when you say I should have made the bet bigger, is that because you plan on barreling the river or because you plan on giving up? Which mentality were you in? Or are you thinking about it now? As you say, man, I wish I would have made that bet bigger. Is it because you're planning on, boy, this is my one shot to win the pot and I'll just wave the white flag on the river? Or because that sets me up to then, to make another barrel on the river, an even larger bet?
Yeah, it's twofold. It's a larger bet would be more likely to get him to fold here. And then that will allow me to make an even larger bet. If I made it 3/4 pot here, and then I made it 3/4 pot on the turn, I'm using a bigger bet sizing, putting more pressure on him. Hopefully that would get him to fold any kind of marginal pairs, anything that doesn't feel like calling 3 full streets, that doesn't think their hand is good enough for 3 streets,
Yep.
Yeah.
Derek, did you have something?
No, I was wondering about the size too, but I feel like through a couple of the comments that we kind of moved through that it just felt like what you seemed to after the fact be kind of analyzing, that you felt like you came across that what you were representing, what you're trying to show at this point, you kind of it felt like you turned your hand a slight bit up by the half pot bet there, and I think you were right. It seems like the higher, a little bigger size right there might have been more appropriate, but I think it sounds like you kind of have already come to that conclusion too. So.
Yep, I agree with you. So if I had a hand like ace, king, or king, queen, a really strong top pair hand, I would probably make it $1.25 or $1.50 to get the value out of this guy who called me on the flop. Yeah. So that's another reason why I don't like this sizing. I'm not representing that I have the kind of hand that I'm trying to rep. You know what I mean?
And I know you won't remember because obviously this is an older hand, but as you're thinking about it now, what sort of hand range do you put him on now that he just calls flop and he just calls turn? He's check called both of those streets. What should we be thinking about in terms of range here?
I'm thinking potentially he has flush draws as well as random kings right now. Or even the straight draw. 6-7 might do it as well. Just to try to hit their 8 outer, or I guess 6 outer if he's worried I might have 2 clubs or 2 hearts, But I think that's the weakest hand that can call me, a 6-7 right now for that open-ended straight draw. A 5 might call if they're unbelieving 2 streets, but my guess is a 5 would fold in this instance. So like I said, heart draws and a king.
And if you think of at this point, if he had a bigger hand, like if he had 4-5 or if he had a set of 4s or something like that, at this point, he probably would put in a raise and try to put some pressure on.
Definitely. He's either donk leading for 3/4 pot, a full pot, $2 bet or something, if he does have one of those hands, or he is planning to check raise here. It's one of those two for sure.
Yeah. Okay. Stacy?
Yeah, I'm just wondering what you think his range or his idea of your range is right now.
That's a good question. My guess, half pot flop, half pot turn. He's probably thinking jacks, 10s, 9s, some kind of a king, a flush draw, or even an ace high hand that he can crack and bluff catch me, potentially. Yeah, because he's not raising, so he's not going to put me on a really strong hand. Well, how should I... No, he's just calling. I guess he could put me on a strong hand and hoping I have a flush draw or something. He could put me on ace king here, but he's just being stubborn and calling with a weaker pair or a flush draw,
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
Is there any consideration to a check back here? If the deuce of clubs comes on the turn and you say this guy's really flop honest and then kind of doesn't change much on the turn, deuce of clubs really isn't scaring much out there. So it's a decent chance he's going to be calling behind.
I agree with you. A check back is not a bad play at all, but that's why I said I should have made this bet bigger to try to get the fold. $1's not getting anything that called on the flop to fold on the turn, but $1.50 might. So if I am going to double barrel, a bigger size is better. But checking back isn't bad at all because now I don't risk him check raising or anything, and I only have a jack high hand. I could potentially hit a jack or a 10 for a decent second pair hand or a club for a flush. So checking back is not a bad play at all here. Yeah.
Okay.
All righty. So let's see this river. The river comes $4 pot, a 3 of spades. Yeah. So a random 6 has a straight on the deuce 3, 4, 5 board. An ace has a straight. Any kind of pair of kings still has their kings. And I just have a jack high busted flush draw hand. So he checks to me. And if you look at that, he folds 43% of the time on the river, but I don't think I sold my strong hand enough for this half pot bet to work on the river. I think I just threw money away here. I think making it bigger on the turn, and if he called that bigger turn bet, I could easily check behind this jack high, knowing that I am beat, that he's not going to fold on the river right here. So I really hate this bet. Well, I already told what I think, but what do you guys think of this $2 half pot bet bluff on the river?
I always get torn on this because I feel like I need to do a lot more work off the felt on something like this because, like how much of his range, if he just has a heart draw, that 8, 9 of hearts, I guess you're ahead of that anyway. But say he has, queen, jack of hearts, some of those sorts of hands where he just completely whiffed this thing, you're gonna get a win. If he's got, ace 9 or something, he might give up here. So I feel like you're getting some folds of hands that would beat you if it went to showdown. So I'm kind of torn on that because I feel like it's doing that. You're not betting enough really to get rid of the kings, to get rid of those one pair decent hands, but you are folding out a portion of his range that would beat you.
Yeah, a portion right now, but I just don't think $2 is big enough on the guy that called the flop in the turn, half pot bets already. Yeah. If he has any kind of pair, he's calling again, unless he puts me on an ace, but he's probably still calling with any random king because it goes runner, runner. For me to have a straight with an ace, he's probably not going to believe that and is just going to call.
Yeah. Chad?
Well, I think it just goes back to the start of the hand with the min raise pre-flop. And, he was in the big blind, so he's just going to call with pretty much everything. So the betting size there seemed to be small, and then just the half pot the whole way through. if I could see him just having a 4. But yeah, it could definitely be sitting there with a 6 by the river, pair of pocket 6s or something like that. Betting $2 on the river, I don't think is going to get you anywhere. You're probably better off just checking back and giving up. Otherwise, you should have bombed it and gone full pot.
Yep, full pot or at a minimum $3. I agree with you, Chad, 100%. Full pot sounds really good at this point right here.
Derek?
Yeah, I agree with Chad. I'm thinking bomb there just because I agree with Chad. If I have a 4 here, I think I call you, and maybe he was just calling with ace high and you get there too, and I mean, potentially, I guess you could rep that you had it, and so then he's going to call anyway and chop with you. So, yeah, I think you got to bomb it there or just give up. And because of the way it was played leading into this, I think I just check back at this point.
I agree with you. I think I botched this hand.
Taylor, did you have anything?
Yeah, I was going to say, if we're all talking about making the river size bigger here, which I think we all agree on, doesn't that give credence to the previous hand when we turned the Broadway to make that river bet a little bit on the bigger side? So the last hand we bet 7 on the river. I mean, does that make sense to go, 10, even a full pot of like 12, in the sense that we want to keep both of those hands the same?
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. I'm not a big guy on the whole idea of just balance in general and playing balanced against different players. I'm more of the mindset of exploiting my current opponent and the situation at the time too. That board was so much more wet that, and he had so many more good potential hands in his range that I think that $7 bet gave me maximum value. In this instance right here, he does have some strong hands in his range. He has a rivered, I think like Derek was saying, a rivered ace or a 6 for a straight that is just going to, that will never fold in this instance, So I understand what you're saying for some kind of a balance thing, but at the micro stakes like this, 25 NL, I really don't try to balance, or I try to play against the opponent I have at the time.
Okay.
Is there any thought to just checking and giving in if he goes big, and just seeing if he maybe just shows down with a check?
You mean checking on the turn?
No, on the river. Oh no, I'm sorry. I'm out of position here. He checked to you.
Yeah.
Okay. Any thought of just giving up, so to speak?
Yes, totally. Yep. I think that's the best play in this instance with the way I've played it up to this point. Now,
right.
If I had bet bigger on the flop, bigger on the turn, then I think betting bigger on the river could get him to fold on this potential scare card. Like, is he calling with that many aces on the flop and the turn? Is he calling with ace 5 on the flop and then ace 5, he picks up a gut shot, but he still only has second pair? I don't know if he has that many aces. So I think bigger bets flop turn and then river could have gotten the fold here, or won the pot, I should say.
Okay.
Yeah. Cool. So let's see what he had at showdown. And his hand totally makes sense. Yeah. King 9 offsuit right there. A call pre-flop is just fine versus the min raise. I can't fault him for that. And then check calling flop turn river with the top pair weak kicker, I'm fine with that too, especially seeing as how my sizing was so small. But now looking at his hand, it is possible if I was bombing it bigger, bam, 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 he could find a fold. But over these last 16 hands, I've been pretty aggressive, 63, 38. I've been playing a lot of hands. He might not be so believing of me and might just call flop turn river at 3/4 pot the whole way.
Yeah, heads up. It's pretty hard to, top pair middle kicker is not a bad hand. Heads up. It's pretty hard to push somebody off of that. I'm a little surprised he never check raised you at any point in time, especially on the turn.
Yeah. I guess he probably just had, I have the potential here because I raised pre-flop,
right?
Better hands, ace, king, king, queen, king, jack. And so he's not taking the chance. He's just letting me spew chips at him.
Yeah, give me a little rope.
Yep. That's what he did there. Does anybody see any fault in the way he played the hand? I see plenty of fault in my way, but any fault in his?
Not really. I probably would have found a raise in there at some point, either a 3-bet pre-flop or at some point in there trying to get some value from you. But like you said, I mean, there's a lot of hands that beat you, but I probably would have put you to test a little bit on that, depending on how the heads up had been played.
Yeah, good.
But no.
Steve, if you had to pick, do you feel like looking out at King 9 first, you feel like you'd be more apt to 3-bet there, or after this flop call and then the turn, what it brings there. Is that kind of the point? Would you put the pressure on there?
Yeah, I mean, if he'd been opening a fair amount of pots on the button heads up, I tend to 3-bet king 9 there heads up for a few different reasons. First of all, I think I'm probably ahead of his range there, but secondly, I also want him to think twice about opening every pot. That might be wrong thinking. But that is sort of what I'm thinking there, and then I take control of the pot, and then I can kind of dictate a little bit more post flop.
Yeah, and you're laying some groundwork for future hands too. I mean, heads up, that's such a different beast too. So.
Yeah.
I thought the turn, I mean, potentially could have been a spot where I guess if I had king 9, I don't know. I think I would lean more towards the call, but I could definitely see advocating for, I could see that him raising there too at the turn.
Yeah, that's just because that's such a wet card, that turn card.
There's a lot of interesting things happening now where you're going to be guessing on the river, and you don't want to be guessing.
Right, but if he's trying to play pot control against guy on the button there who could have bigger kings, and that's why he's calling down, he's probably playing pot control.
Yeah, it does feel like he's like, I'm calling all the way unless maybe an ace came or something, but otherwise it does feel like it's just call.
I do like setting the tone a little bit of a heads up. I like to not let people think that all I'm going to do is just call them the whole time. And again, this is just one hand in the context of overall heads up, but I do kind of like to make people think twice about making loose wagers.
So if you were looking to 3-bet this you're saying that would be the type of thing you'd want to do in the first, let's say half a dozen, 8, 9 hands, something like that. I mean, you want to establish that early. You're not.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, maybe. Or if, once we see that he's been opening almost every button, that might be a good spot to do it then too. It could be later on too. I mean, it depends. If my image has been really tight, it's a good spot to pick up some chips later and heads up too.
Yeah.
Pretty much, I'm always looking to 3-bet Sky. So whatever the situation.
There you go. Yep, I'm not a bad opponent at all to 3-bet. I'm a tight, aggressive player, so I do open, raise, and fold plenty for sure. Especially when I'm out of position. This instance would have been in position, but when I'm out of position, you 3-bet me. That's an easy takedown most of the time.
Yeah, but you're going to see a flop with this one probably, unless the 3-bet's really big.
Yeah,
heads
absolutely.
up, Jack 10 suited. Yeah. So Sky, we're almost out of time. I'd like to, if you don't mind, spend a couple of minutes talking a little bit about. On your email, you sent just that you'd done some analysis on Jack 10. We don't need to get into all of your analysis, but if you could just kind of share for the listeners and for us, kind of how do you approach that when you say, okay, I want to analyze Jack 10, and you obviously have the luxury of having your poker tracker or whatever it is that you're using here to look at the data. We might not have that data, but how do you actually kind of approach that, saying I want to analyze how I'm playing Jack 10?
That is a good question. So let me show you my database here. You can see it on the screen, Poker Tracker 4.
And walk through a little bit for the audio folks. Make sure you kind of touch on things just for the audio folks.
Definitely. So Poker Tracker 4 is a poker tracking database. Depending on the site that you play on, it records all of the hands that you play. And with all of those hands, it develops different statistics for your play. For example, VPIP is voluntarily put money in the pot. It knows that with Jack 10 suited, or Jack 10 suited and offsuit, I voluntarily put money in 27% of the time. So 1 out of 4 times I play it. That does, like I said at the very beginning, I love this hand. I love playing it. But if somebody comes in for a raise, I'm not automatically 3-betting, nor am I automatically calling, just depending on the other players at the table, the size of the raise, the type of player, But that's what Poker Tracker 4 does. It looks at your hands like this. And what I have here.
Can I interrupt you for 1 second, Sky? I just want to interrupt for 1 second just to point out one thing on there. Not that, I could look at data all day, but just for the folks on the radio or on the podcast, but also in general, we talk about the value of position, and you're saying 27% of the time you're playing Jack 10, early position at 7.5%, and on the button it's 37.5%. Just to give folks an idea of the value of position, at least how you're valuing position, saying, okay, not all Jack 10s are created equal. Early position, you're playing it 7%. Late position, you're playing it 37% of the time. I think that's a critical concept.
Absolutely. And, but contrary, not contrary, but kind of, I don't know what to say exactly. If you look at the screen right here, in position with Jack 10 suited, you think, hey, you have the best position. You should be making money. No, I'm $28 down on the button when I'm playing it 37% of the time. In the early position, $4 up when I play it only 7% of the time. So I think, like I said at the beginning, Jack 10 is such a pretty hand. I want to play it. I probably sometimes play it in situations that I shouldn't. Maybe I'm just calling way too often, especially when I have position, because it's such a pretty hand. I want to see flops. So I'm possibly losing a lot of small little pots, but that adds up to big losses overall, $28 down. And as you can see in my database, since January 1st of 2018, I've played this hand 1,269 times, and I'm down $55 or negative 28 big blinds per 100 hands. So it's not a profitable hand for me at all. But what I'll do sometimes with a specific hand, if I want to look it up, I'll just filter in my database for that hand. And then you can look at it by position. So we can go to the button right here, all the different Jack 10s that I played on the button. We can sort it by the currency one. You can see Jack 10 offsuit, my best hand, I won $6.42, which is just over 26 big blinds, give or take. And then we can review the hand to see what happened and how I played it. Obviously, I turned a full house. That's why I won so much with it, But if we look at if we sort it by the currency loss, Jack 10 suited, I lost $6.55, roughly 26 big blinds again when I flopped that flush draw plus a gut shot, and then I raised and folded on the turn to somebody's shove, So what I can do is go through these hands and take a look at them and replay it and see how I played it and see what I did wrong, look at the various percentages, run stuff through Flopzilla. So this is basically how I study specific hands if I want to just see how I'm playing them and how I could potentially play them better.
So that's fantastic, dude. We could spend hours and hours talking about this. So just as you kind of analyze Jack 10, and I don't know how extensive that's been, are there any key takeaways for you as a result of this study that may change what you're going to do with Jack 10? Did my audio cut out there?
Sorry, Steve. I'm going to assume your question is over. Not just yet. I was still last week when I sent you these hands. I was in the middle of looking at Jack 10, and I kind of got away from it. I'm planning a webinar and stuff that I'm doing soon, so I kind of put the Jack 10 studies to the side. But I know just in general, I am playing it a bit too frequently from the button and the cutoff. Those are the best positions, so I should be able to find ways to get aggressive with them. But as you guys saw on that one hand, I was on the button with Jack 10 suited, and I just wasn't as aggressive with my bet sizing as I should have been to get the fold. And I'm thinking that can be a big part of my issue. When I'm not hitting the flop, I'm just not, because I only have a Jack high hand, I'm not betting what I should, is what I'm thinking. But it will require more research.
Derek?
Well, hey, I just had a question, guys. So if I'm reading this right, you have, out of 230 hands, am I reading this wrong, that you 3-bet pre-flop from the button with Jack 10 suited, or I think it's always suited. I guess I didn't see if it was suited or unsuited. But Jack 10, you've 3-bet 0 times out of 230
Exactly.
hands?
Yep, 0 times.
It's kind of a strategy decision, or because I know you said you kind of play like field player versus having like a succinct sort of, this is what I do. And that seems strange that you would never have had a 3-bet.
Yeah, exactly. I should probably be 3-betting more. And that's probably one thing that I can take away from this research. The thing with Jack 10 is I've just always viewed it. And if you look at the numbers in Flopzilla and stuff, it is such a good calling hand. It hits flops so well. You hit such good draws with it. But I'm probably relying on playing it as a call way too frequently. And I should be throwing in some more 3-bets, especially when I think my opponent is capable of folding. And if they're capable of calling a 3-bet, but they fold a lot to flop C-bets, that's a great time as well to throw out the 3-bet, build the pot. As soon as that flop hits, even if I don't hit it, C-bet to make them fold and use a bigger sizing than just half pot,
Sure. Well, and the other thing too is you have the 2-bet, to the 2-bet, pre-flop fold, it's 80% versus calling the 3-bet. So you're in position on the button, and assuming, particularly if you have Jack 10 suited, someone's 3-betting, let's say if an early position raise or one of the blinds raises, is 20%. Do you feel like that's low? I don't look at these sort of stats a lot, but calling that 3-bet, knowing you're going to have position to see a flop, is that low at 20%, you think?
Yeah, I think it is a little bit low. It probably should be higher to closer to 30 or 40%. This 80% is 8 out of 10. So I folded 8 times versus a 3-bet out of the blinds. But I should be defending with this hand a little bit more frequently. Some people will tell you should be defending with it as much as possible. But one thing that I think about when I'm facing a 3-bet, I try to gauge their range. most players, when they're 3-betting me, they have something way better than Jack 10. It could be just 9s or 8s, which I chop with, but oftentimes it's stronger pocket pairs, ace king, ace queen, ace jack even, that totally crushes my Jack 10. And when I open raise with this hand and facing a 3-bet, I often want to stay out of trouble, but that could be another problem I'm having. Maybe I should be defending with it more often. Maybe I'm not good enough when I have the Jack 10. Maybe I'm not paying attention to the people in the blinds as much to realize whether or not they're going to 3-bet me. Maybe as soon as I see the Jack 10, I auto open raise with it instead of thinking ahead. So that could be another issue right there.
That's good stuff, Scott. Unfortunately, we're going to have to wrap it up. As always, all good things must come to an end. Give us a quick little thought on where people can find you if they want to hear more about you and hear your podcast and your website and everything.
Absolutely. Thank you. It's smartpokerstudy.com is the website. The name of the podcast is Smart Poker Study. If you just type in anywhere, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, just type in Smart Poker Study, you'll find me there for sure.
Awesome. Well, thanks to Sky. Thanks to Running Aces once again for being our official sponsor. RecPokerTraining.com. Go check that out. Crazy Like a Fox. Starting in about 3 weeks, so check that out too. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me, and we will be in touch. So good luck on the felt, everybody. We'll chat with you next week. Thanks.